Welcome to your HESI A2 practice review. Each question mirrors the real exam. We cover why the right answer works and the others fail. Today's set covers comprehension and author's purpose, prefixes, roots and vocabulary, grammar and usage, anatomy and biology, chemistry and units. And remember, our website is packed with free exam guides and practice questions to help you ace the HESI A2. You'll find the link right down in the description below, so go check it out and study smarter, not harder. Trust me, it really makes a difference. Let's jump in. Question 1. Which subatomic particle determines the identity of an element? Your options are A. Proton, B. Neutron, C. Electron, D. Positron. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is A. Proton. Is correct because the proton count, called the atomic number, defines the identity of an element on the periodic table. Changing the proton number changes the element entirely, while changes in neutrons or electrons do not. B is wrong because neutrons affect the mass number and create isotopes of the same element. They do not determine which element an atom represents on the periodic table, since isotopes of an element share the same identity. C is wrong because electrons determine charge and chemical behavior of an atom in reactions. Losing or gaining electrons forms ions of the same element, rather than producing a different element altogether on the modern periodic table. D is wrong because positrons are antiparticles of electrons that appear in certain nuclear processes inside special reactions. They are not stable components of ordinary atoms, so they have no role in defining the identity of any element. Every element on the periodic table is defined by a single number, how many protons sit in its nucleus. That number is called the atomic number, and it is the entire definition of elemental identity. Hydrogen has 1 proton, carbon has 6, oxygen has 8, iron has 26. Change that proton count by even 1, and the atom becomes an entirely different element with different chemistry and different properties. Neutrons sit alongside protons in the nucleus and affect atomic mass. Adding or removing neutrons creates isotopes, atoms of the same element with different masses. Electrons orbit in shells and drive all chemical bonding, but neither neutrons nor electrons determine which element an atom is. Protons define the element, neutrons determine the isotope, and electrons govern charge and chemical reactivity. When an atom gains or loses electrons, it becomes an ion, a charged version of the same element, not a new one. Whenever a question asks what defines or distinguishes an element, the answer is always the proton count, the atomic number, mass number, neutron count, and electron count are secondary attributes that can vary without ever changing what an atom fundamentally is. Question 2. The new graduate nurse approached the first code with trepidation. Her hand shook slightly as she gathered the equipment, and her voice was unsteady when she called out the patient's vital signs. Only after the patient stabilized did her breathing return to normal and her shoulders relax. In the passage, the word trepidation most likely means. Your options are A. Confidence, B. Excitement, C. Indifference, D. Fearful uncertainty. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is D. Fearful uncertainty. D is correct because the surrounding details of shaking hands, unsteady voice, and relief once the situation resolved point clearly to fearful uncertainty as the meaning of the word in this nursing context, which is the closest synonym available. That is wrong because the passage describes shaking hands, an unsteady voice, and tense shoulders, all of which signal the absence of confidence rather than its presence. So this synonym contradicts the surrounding context clues. B is wrong because while excitement can produce shaking, the passage frames the response as relief once the patient stabilized, which fits an anxious rather than eager state and rules out a positive emotion synonym here. C is wrong because indifference would not produce shaking hands or a voice that returns to normal only after the patient stabilizes. So the passage's description of the body's response rules out an emotionally neutral reading. Vocabulary and context questions don't test whether you've memorized a word. They test whether you can read the surrounding passage carefully enough to assemble the meaning from the clues the writer left behind. 5 context clue types appear repeatedly on entrance exams: definition clues, example clues, synonym clues, antonym clues, and inference clues. Recognizing which type is at work in a passage gives you a systematic place to look for the answer. Picture a research article using the word obfuscate, even without knowing it, surrounding phrases, deliberately confused the data, obscured the methodology, made findings difficult to interpret, at SAS, or point toward concealment. The passage itself builds the definition for you. Watch for 2 traps. First, a real but wrong synonym, a word that fits the target in another context but not this one. Second, a mismatched emotional charge. The passage telegraphs positive, negative, or neutral tone, and the correct answer must match it. Both traps are beaten the same way. Read the surrounding sentences and check every answer against the specific scene described. Signal phrases like most likely means or as used in the passage tell you to interpret the word through the writer's scene, not a dictionary. Slow down, gather the surrounding details, and let the passage point you to the answer. Question 3. Which type of error appears in this sentence? The IV bag was empty. The nurse hung a new one without delay this evening. Your options are A. Comma splice, B. Sentence fragment, C. Subject-verb mismatch, D. Dangling modifier. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is A. Comma splice. A is correct because comma splice is correct because 2 independent clauses are joined with only a comma. They need a semicolon, a period, or a coordinating conjunction with the comma. The clauses cannot share a single comma alone. B is wrong because sentence fragment refers to an incomplete thought, but this sentence contains 2 complete thoughts. The flaw is overjoining, not lack of completeness. So a fragment label does not describe what is happening here today. C is wrong because subject-verb mismatch involves a verb that does not agree with its subject. Both verbs in this sentence agree with their subjects in number and person, so the agreement label does not describe the actual problem. D is wrong because dangling modifier describes a modifier that does not clearly attach to a noun. The sentence has no introductory modifier in need of attachment, so the dangling modifier label does not apply to this error. A comma splice is one of the most common punctuation errors tested on entrance exams. It happens when 2 independent clauses, each a complete thought with its own subject and verb, snatiwisitimwig, are joined by only a comma, which is too weak to carry that grammatical weight. Each independent clause contains a subject and a finite verb and can stand alone as its own sentence. When only a comma sits between them, the punctuation fails to signal the boundary, and that failure is the comma splice. There are 4 standard fixes. Replace the comma with a period, giving each clause its own sentence. Use a semicolon to mark the break while signaling closeness. Keep the comma, but add a coordinating conjunction from the Fane boys group. Or rewrite one clause as a subordinate clause using words like because, although, or when. Exam questions also test whether you can distinguish a comma splice from similar errors. A run-on joins 2 independent clauses with no punctuation at all. A fragment is the opposite problem. a group of words that cannot stand alone because it lacks a subject, a verb, or a complete thought. The quickest check is mechanical. Mentally place a period where the comma sits. If both pieces still work as complete sentences, you have a comma splice. If only one piece works alone, the error is something different entirely. Question 4. Which type of error appears in this sentence? The student nurse enjoys studying anatomy, taking patient histories, and to chart vital signs. Your options are comma splice, B, sentence fragment, C, faulty parallelism, D, dangling modifier. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is C, faulty parallelism. C is correct because faulty parallelism is correct because the list mixes two gerunds, studying and taking, with the infinitive to chart. The third item should be charting to match the form of the first two items in series. A is wrong because comma splice is the joining of two independent clauses with only a comma. This sentence contains a single independent clause with a list of activities. So the comma splice label does not apply. B is wrong because sentence fragment refers to an incomplete thought. This sentence has a subject, a verb, and a clear meaning, so it is a complete sentence. The fragment label requires missing essential elements not absent here today. D is wrong because dangling modifier describes an introductory modifier with no clear noun to attach to. This sentence has no introductory modifying phrase causing such a problem, so the dangling modifier label does not describe this error. Parallelism is the principle that every item in a series, every side of a comparison, and every half of a paired construction must share the same grammatical form. When one item breaks the pattern, the reader loses the rhythm and has to backtrack to recover the meaning. The rule applies in three main places: within a series, across comparisons like harder than, and inside correlative conjunctions such as both and, whether, or, and not only but also. Each context demands that the forms on every side match exactly. Here is the classic error in action: preparing samples, recording data, and to interpret results breaks parallelism because the first two items are gerunds and the third is an infinitive. Swapping in interpreting results brings all three into the same grammatical form and restores the rhythm. Faulty parallelism is often confused with other errors, but each has a distinct identity. A comma splice joins two independent clauses with only a comma. A fragment is an incomplete thought. A dangling modifier fails to attach to a logical noun. Faulty parallelism is specifically a mismatch of grammatical form within a list or comparison. The fastest way to spot faulty parallelism is to isolate each item in the series and compare their forms. If they do not match, identify the misfit and rewrite it to align with the others. That single habit will catch the error on any exam. Question 5. Which type of error appears in the following word group while charting at the nurse's station after a long 12-hour shift on the unit? Your options are A, run-on sentence, B, comma splice, C, subject-verb mismatch, D, sentence fragment. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is D, sentence fragment. D is correct because sentence fragment is correct because the word group lacks an independent clause. The introductory while phrase has no main subject and verb to complete it, so the words cannot stand alone as a sentence. Is wrong because a run-on sentence joins two independent clauses without proper punctuation. This word group has no independent clause at all, so it cannot be a run-on. Run-ons require at least two complete clauses joined incorrectly. B is wrong because a comma splice joins two independent clauses with only a comma. There are no independent clauses present here, so this label does not fault the error. The word group lacks even a single complete clause. C is wrong because subject-verb mismatch refers to a verb disagreeing with its subject. This word group has neither a complete subject nor a finite verb to disagree, so the label cannot apply to this kind of fragment here. A sentence fragment looks like a sentence but is missing at least one of the three things every complete sentence requires. Understanding what those three requirements are and how fragments sneak past us is the key to catching them reliably. Every complete sentence must have a subject, a finite verb, and a complete thought. Fragments can be surprisingly long, packed with descriptive detail, and still fail on any one of these three counts. Length is never the same as completeness. The trickiest fragments begin with subordinating conjunctions like while, because, if, although, unless, and until, or with participial phrases beginning in ing or ed, or with long prepositional openers. Each of these signals a dependent structure that cannot stand alone. It is always waiting for a main clause to complete the thought. Notice how adding a main clause, the nurse reviewed the chart, instantly fixes the fragment. The dependent clause introduced by while becomes a legitimate introductory modifier, and the thought is complete. The same principle applies to participial phrases. Attach them to a full independent clause or rewrite them as one. When you spot a word group on an exam, ask one question: can it stand alone as a complete sentence? If the words leave you waiting for more, a fragment is in play. The fix is always to attach it to an independent clause or rewrite it with its own subject and finite verb. Question 6. Which base unit in the metric system is used to measure mass? Your options are A. Gram, B. Liter, C. Meter, D. Second. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is A. Gram. A is correct because the gram and its prefix forms such as kilogram and milligram are the metric base units used for measuring mass. They appear widely in chemistry, medicine, nursing practice, and laboratory settings. B is wrong because the liter measures volume, which is the amount of space occupied by a substance, rather than mass. Mass is the property representing the quantity of matter contained within an object or sample. C is wrong because the meter measures length or distance between 2 points in space, not mass at all. Mass is the property describing the amount of matter present in any object or chemical sample being measured. D is wrong because the second measures time intervals during which events occur in physics and chemistry. It is unrelated to mass, the physical property describing how much matter an object actually contains in its structure. The metric system organizes measurement around a small set of base units, each capturing exactly one physical property. Understanding which unit belongs to which property is the foundation of every calculation in science and clinical practice. Each base unit is independent. The gram measures mass, the liter measures volume, the meter measures length, and the second measures time. These properties cannot be swapped. Confusing them produces errors that cascade through chemistry, physics, and clinical dosing. Mass is the amount of matter in an object and stays constant everywhere. Weight is the gravitational force on that mass and changes with gravity. An astronaut on the moon has the same mass as on Earth but weighs only 1/6 as much, which is exactly why science uses grams for mass, not a force unit. Prefixes extend the gram to any scale needed. The microgram handles hormones and trace compounds. The milligram covers most medication doses, and the kilogram is used for body weight and large quantities. Because the prefix system is consistent, the same logic applies to liters, meters, and seconds. The exam day skill is matching the right unit to the right property. Weighing a solid points to grams. Pouring a fluid points to liters. Measuring a distance points to meters. Timing a rate points to seconds. Get that match right, and every derived calculation that follows will start on solid ground. Question 7. The chart noted that the patient had hypertension and was being treated to bring the readings into a healthy range. The provider also wrote a referral for dietary counseling about sodium intake. Based on the prefix hyper and the root tension, the word hypertension most likely refers to. Your options are A. Low blood pressure, B. High blood pressure, C. Irregular heart rhythm, D. Slow heart rate. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is B. High blood pressure. B is correct because the prefix hyper means above or excessive, and tension here refers to vascular pressure, so the term means high blood pressure, which fits the dietary referral about reducing sodium that the chart describes. A is wrong because the prefix hyper means above or excessive rather than below or low, so reading the term as low blood pressure inverts the prefix's standard meaning and does not match the surrounding context about sodium intake. C is wrong because irregular rhythm would be described by terms involving rhythm or beat rather than tension, and the prefix hyper does not point to rhythm at all, so this option misses both the prefix and the root. D is wrong because slow heart rate is described by bradycardia rather than hypertension, and the root tension does not refer to heart rate, so this option fails on both the prefix and the root in the medical word. Medical terminology is built like a kit. Almost every clinical word can be broken into a prefix, a root, and sometimes a suffix, each carrying its own consistent meaning. Once you learn the parts, thousands of terms become decodable on first encounter. Every medical word is assembled from up to 3 building blocks: a prefix that modifies meaning, a root that names the core concept, and a suffix that marks the type of condition. Together they form a predictable, decodable system inherited from Greek and Latin medical traditions. The prefix hyper means over or excessive, signaling higher than normal levels. Its mirror opposite, hypo, means under or below normal. Memorizing this pair alone unlocks dozens of clinical terms, because the same roots appear with both prefixes: tension, glycemia, thermia, and more. The root tension in a medical context refers specifically to vascular pressure. The force blood exerts against arterial walls as the heart pumps. Hypertension means that pressure runs persistently above the normal range, contributing to heart disease, stroke, and kidney damage when left uncontrolled. When you see an unfamiliar clinical term on an exam, pause and break it down piece by piece. Identify the prefix and root before choosing an answer. The parts always carry consistent meanings, and that discipline protects you from tempting but incorrect alternatives. Question 8. Select the best verb for the blank in the following sentence. Each of the patients come given a wristband at the time of admission to the hospital. Your options are A is B are, C were, D have been. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is A. Is. A is correct because is correctly agrees with the singular indefinite pronoun each. Although patients is plural, the true subject is each, which always takes a singular verb regardless of the prepositional phrase that follows the pronoun here. B is wrong because RA is plural and would agree only if the subject were patients. The subject is each, an always singular indefinite pronoun. So R is incorrect here in the formal grammar tested on the exam today. C is wrong because were is plural past tense. The subject each is singular, and the present passive structure of the sentence requires a singular present tense verb instead. The plural past tense fails on 2 grounds simultaneously here. D is wrong because have been is plural present perfect. Each is always singular and requires the singular has been, not the plural have been, for proper agreement. The simple present is also more idiomatic here than perfect tense. Subject-verb agreement requires every verb to match its subject in number and person. The rule itself is straightforward, but English hides the true subject behind layers of modifying phrases, and that's exactly what exam writers exploit. 4 structures trip up most test takers. Prepositional phrases insert a misleading noun between the subject and verb. Indefinite pronouns like each and every are always singular. Both, few, many, and several are always plural. And with or and nor, the verb matches whichever subject is closest to it. The key strategy is to mentally cross out the prepositional phrase. In the list of approved medications is posted, the head noun is list, singular say, so the verb is singular. The word medications cannot change that, because it lives inside the prepositional phrase, not in the subject position. When subjects are joined by or nor, the verb agrees with whichever noun is closer to it. The nurse or the patients are ready uses plural or because patients is closest. Flip the order and the patients or the nurse is ready becomes singular. Same words, different agreement. On every agreement question, cross out the prepositional phrase, identify the true head noun, and match the verb to it. Collective nouns like team and committee default to singular in American English. Once you see through the noise, the correct verb form becomes obvious. Question 9. A trait carried on the X chromosome that appears more often in males is best described as which of the following? Your options are A. Autosomal dominant, B. Autosomal recessive, C. X-linked recessive, D. Y-linked. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is C. X-linked recessive. C is correct because X-linked recessive traits appear more often in males, because males have only one X chromosome in their cells. A single recessive allele on that X is enough to produce the trait. A is wrong because autosomal dominant traits are carried on autosomes, not on the X chromosome at all. They affect males and females about equally, so they do not match the pattern of male predominance described. B is wrong because autosomal recessive traits are carried on autosomes and require 2 copies for the trait to appear. They affect males and females equally and do not show the male predominance described in question. D is wrong because Y-linked traits are passed only from father to son and affect only males overall, but most classic genetic diseases of this pattern are not Y-linked. The example matches X-linked recessive. One of the most distinctive patterns in human genetics is X-linked recessive inheritance. To understand it, we need to look at how sex chromosomes are distributed differently between males and females, and what that asymmetry means for trait expression. Females carry 2 X chromosomes, so a recessive allele on one X can be masked by a dominant allele on the other. Males carry only one X and one Y. Because the Y does not carry a matching gene, whatever allele sits on a male's single X is expressed directly, dominant or recessive. When a carrier mother passes her recessive X to a son, he expresses the condition because no second X is present to mask it. That same recessive X passed to a daughter typically produces a carrier, not an affected individual, because the daughter's other X usually carries the dominant allele. Classic X-linked recessive conditions include red-green color blindness, hemophilia A, hemophilia B, and Duchenne muscular dystrophy. All of these appear far more frequently in males exactly as the chromosomal mathematics predicts. Whenever a question describes a trait appearing much more often in males than females, reach for X-linked recessive. Autosomal traits affect both sexes equally, and Y-linked traits skip females entirely. But X-linked recessive is the pattern defined by male predominance with female carriers. Question 10. The new infection control policy was met with reluctance among staff. Some nurses argued that the extra steps would slow patient care, and several openly resisted the change for the first week. Only after the unit director demonstrated faster outcomes did adoption become routine. In the passage, the word reluctance most likely means. Your options are A. Unwillingness, B. Enthusiasm, C. Confusion, D. Forgetfulness. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is A. Unwillingness. A is correct because the passage shows nurses arguing the extra steps would slow care and openly resisting the change, which are clear signs of unwillingness, so this synonym matches the behavior the surrounding context describes. B is wrong because enthusiasm would mean staff welcome the policy, but the passage describes argument and resistance, so this synonym contradicts the very behavior the writer uses to define the targeted word for the reader. C is wrong because confusion implies staff did not understand the new policy, but the passage shows they understood it well enough to argue against specific extra steps. So this option misses the surrounding context entirely. D is wrong because forgetfulness would mean staff simply failed to follow the policy without intent, but the passage describes deliberate argument and open resistance, which are active rather than absent-minded responses to the change. When a passage uses an unfamiliar word, you rarely need a dictionary. The surrounding sentences almost always contain the clues you need to build a working definition before you even look at the answer choices. Writers pack paragraphs with 4 types of signals: descriptive details, cause and effect chains, contrasting ideas, and concrete examples. Spotting any one of these lets you triangulate toward the word's meaning without ever opening a dictionary. Behavioral words form clusters that rotate across exams. Reluctance suggests inner unwillingness before eventual compliance. Hesitance signals uncertainty rather than principled resistance. Defiance is open and active rebellion. Aversion carries the strongest, most visceral rejection. The passage tells you which shade fits. Think of the unknown word as the center of a web. The actions characters take, the contrasts the writer sets up, the causes and effects described. All of these arrows point inward and together reveal what the word must mean. Before selecting an answer, ask 3 questions. Does this choice match the emotional charge of the passage? Does it match the intensity of the behavior described? And does it leave any contextual detail unexplained? The choice that satisfies all 3 is almost always correct. Question 11. Which structure is the primary muscle of inspiration during quiet breathing in healthy adults? Your options are A. External intercostal muscles, B. Internal intercostal muscles, C. Abdominal muscles, D. Diaphragm. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is D. Diaphragm. D is correct because the diaphragm is the primary muscle of inspiration during quiet breathing. When it contracts, it flattens and increases thoracic volume, lowering intrathoracic pressure so that air flows down a pressure gradient into the lungs. A is wrong because the external intercostal muscles assist with inspiration by elevating the ribs and expanding the thoracic cage. They are accessory muscles of breathing and contribute to chest expansion, but are not the primary inspiratory muscle. B is wrong because the internal intercostal muscles depress the ribs during forced expiration, helping to push air out of the lungs. They are not the primary muscle responsible for normal quiet inspiration in healthy adults. C is wrong because the abdominal muscles contract during forced expiration to push the diaphragm upward and reduce thoracic volume. They support coughing and heavy exhalation, but are not the main inspiratory muscle in quiet breathing. Breathing is driven by muscles that change the volume of the thoracic cavity. Understanding which muscle does what and when is the key to mastering every variation of this question. The diaphragm is a dome-shaped skeletal muscle at the floor of the thoracic cavity. When it contracts, it flattens downward, increasing thoracic volume. By Boyle's law, that volume increase drops lung pressure below atmospheric pressure and air rushes in. The phrenic nerve, arising from cervical levels C3, C4, and C5, drives this contraction. Different muscles lead at different phases and intensities. Quiet inspiration is led by the diaphragm, assisted by the external intercostals expanding the rib cage laterally. Forced expiration recruits the abdominal muscles and internal intercostals to squeeze air out. Labored or accessory breathing adds the scalenes and sternocleidomastoids to lift the upper rib cage. Expiration during quiet breathing requires no muscular effort. The diaphragm and external intercostals simply relax, and the elastic recoil of the lungs and chest wall pushes air out. Active expiration is different. The abdominal muscles and internal intercostals contract to force the diaphragm upward and drive air out more powerfully. When an exam question mentions quiet breathing or normal inspiration, that points to the diaphragm. Forced expiration points to the abdominal muscles and internal intercostals. Visible accessory muscle use points to the scalenes and sternocleidomastoid. Match the muscle to the phase and the effort level, and the answer follows. Question 12. Which structure carries urine from the kidney to the urinary bladder for storage? Your options are A. Urethra, B. Ureter, C. Renal artery, D. Collecting duct. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is B. Ureter. B is correct because the ureter is a muscular tube that carries urine from the renal pelvis of each kidney to the urinary bladder. Smooth muscle in its wall produces peristaltic waves that move urine downward toward the bladder. A is wrong because the urethra carries urine from the urinary bladder to the outside of the body during urination. It is the final passageway for urine, not the connection between the kidney and the urinary bladder. C is wrong because the renal artery carries oxygenated blood from the abdominal aorta into the kidney to be filtered. It supplies blood for filtration and metabolism but does not transport urine away from the kidney. D is wrong because the collecting duct is part of the nephron system within the kidney itself. It receives fluid from many distal tubules and drains into the renal pelvis, not directly into the urinary bladder. The urinary system follows a fixed pathway from production to elimination. Understanding exactly where the ureter sits in that pathway and what makes it unique is the key to mastering this topic. The pathway is always the same. Kidneys produce urine, ureters carry it down to the bladder stores it, and the urethra expels it from the body. Mixing up any two of these structures, especially ureter and urethra, is one of the most common anatomy exam errors. Each kidney drains into a funnel-shaped renal pelvis, which feeds into its own ureter, so there are two ureters in total. Each ureter is a muscular tube roughly 10 to 12 inches long that descends behind the peritoneum and enters the bladder at an oblique angle, which acts as a one-way valve to prevent urine from refluxing back toward the kidney. The ureter has three defining features worth remembering. First, it uses peristaltic contractions to actively propel urine, so gravity is not required. Second, its oblique entry into the bladder creates a natural valve that blocks backflow. Third, there are always two ureters, one per kidney, both emptying into the bladder. The simplest anchor for exam day. Two ureters carry urine into the bladder, and one urethra carries it out of the body. If a question mentions carrying urine from the kidney or a descending muscular tube, that is the ureter every time. Question 13. The pediatric ward was deserted during the late night shift. Crib rails reflected the dim hallway light. The hum of monitors had quieted, and the only sound came from a single nurse's footsteps. By morning the unit would again be full of voices and small visitors. In the passage, the word deserted most likely means. Your options are A. Crowded with families, B. Filled with bright light, C. Nearly empty, D. Used for storage. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is C. Nearly empty. C is correct because the surrounding details of a single nurse's footsteps, quieted monitors, and the contrast with a morning full of visitors all point to nearly empty as the meaning the writer intends with this word. A is wrong because the passage describes a single nurse's footsteps and quieted monitors, which is the opposite of a crowded family scene. So this option contradicts the very atmosphere the writer takes care to set up. B is wrong because bright light is contradicted by the passage's mention of a dim hallway light, and the targeted word concerns occupancy rather than illumination. So this option misses the relevant attribute entirely. D is wrong because storage use is not implied at any point in the passage, which still describes an active ward with crib rails and monitors running, just lightly populated, so this option imports meaning the text never supports. When a reading passage uses a precise word to describe a setting, the test is not asking whether you already know that word. It is asking whether you can read the surrounding details carefully enough to lock in the right meaning. Words that describe occupancy, emptiness or crowding, are heavily tested because writers layer concrete images around them. A word like deserted will sit beside quieted machinery, dim lighting, and a single solitary figure. A word for crowding will sit beside noise and bustling activity. Think of a hospital ward at night. Dim lights, quiet monitors, and one figure moving through an otherwise empty corridor. The writer never defines the word. Instead, every image confirms the same attribute: the place is nearly empty. Your job is to collect those images before glancing at the answers. The wrong choices each misread which attribute the word concerns. Bright light contradicts the dim setting. Crowded with families contradicts the sparse population. Used for storage imports meaning the passage never supports. Only nearly empty matches every concrete detail the writer actually placed on the page. Before looking at answer choices, build a full mental picture of the scene. Overreading, adding inferences the text never supports, is as dangerous as underreading. Stick to what the accumulated details actually say, and the right answer becomes the only one that fits. Question 14. Which group of the periodic table contains highly reactive nonmetals that readily gain one electron? Your options are halogens, B. Alkali metals, C. Noble gases, D. Transition metals. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is A. Halogens. A is correct because halogens have 7 valence electrons and gain 1 electron easily to complete their outer shell. This behavior makes them highly reactive nonmetals that readily form negatively charged ions during reactions with metals in chemistry. B is wrong because alkali metals are highly reactive metals that lose 1 electron to achieve stability in chemical reactions. They form positive ions rather than gaining an electron the way non-metal halogens do during ionic bond formation. C is wrong because noble gases already have full outer electron shells in their natural state. This electron arrangement makes them generally unreactive and unwilling to gain or lose electrons under normal chemical conditions encountered in the laboratory. D is wrong because transition metals are metals with variable oxidation states across the middle of the periodic table. They typically lose electrons to form positive ions rather than gaining a single electron the way halogens commonly do. The periodic table's vertical columns, called groups, share patterns of valence electrons, the outermost electrons that control how atoms bond and react. Group 17, The halogens is one of the most chemically dramatic groups on the table. Every halogen atom has 7 valence electrons, leaving it one short of a stable, full outer shell. That single vacancy drives halogens to grab an electron from nearby atoms, forming a halide ion with a charge of -1. Reactivity is strongest at the top of the group and decreases as atoms grow larger. Fluorine sits at the top of group 17 and is the most electronegative element on the entire periodic table, pulling electrons toward itself with enormous force. Chlorine, bromine, and iodine follow below, each atom larger than the last, with the outermost electron sitting farther from the nucleus and held less tightly. Contrasting the halogens with neighboring groups reveals the underlying logic of the table. Alkali metals in group 1 lose 1 electron eagerly, forming +1 ions. Alkaline earth metals in group 2 lose 2 electrons. Noble gases in group 18 already have full shells and react with almost nothing, the chemical opposite of halogens. When an exam item says highly reactive non-metal or gains 1 electron, that points to the halogens. Loses 1 electron points to alkali metals. Unreactive or already stable points to the noble gases. Recognizing these electron behaviors is the fastest path to the right answer. Question 15. Which of the following correctly describes the daughter cells produced by mitosis? Your options are A. 4 cells, each with half the chromosomes. B. 2 cells, each with half the chromosomes. C. 4 cells, each identical to the parent. D. 2 cells, each identical to the parent. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is D. 2 cells, each identical to the parent. D is correct because mitosis creates 2 daughter cells, each genetically identical to the parent and with the same chromosome number. This type of division supports growth, tissue repair, and asexual reproduction in single-celled organisms across many groups. A is wrong because producing 4 cells with half the chromosomes describes meiosis, not mitosis. Meiosis is the type of cell division that creates haploid gametes from a diploid parent cell during sexual reproduction in many organisms. B is wrong because 2 cells with half the chromosome number do not result from mitosis. Mitosis preserves the parent chromosome number in each daughter cell, so the new cells are diploid like the parent cell that produced them. C is wrong because mitosis produces only 2 daughter cells, not 4 daughter cells. Although the cells are genetically identical to the parent, the number of cells produced is incorrect for mitosis as it occurs in living tissue. Mitosis is the cell division process that drives growth, repair, and asexual reproduction. Understanding how it differs from meiosis is essential for getting these questions right every time. During mitosis, chromosomes are first duplicated into sister chromatids joined at a centromere. They then align at the metaphase plate before being pulled to opposite poles, ultimately yielding 2 daughter cells each carrying a complete, identical copy of the parent's 46 chromosomes. The 4 phases, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase, spell P8. Chromosomes condense and become visible in prophase, align along the equator in metaphase, are pulled apart in anaphase, and new nuclear envelopes reform in telophase before cytokinesis splits the cell. The sharpest contrast is in outcomes. Mitosis produces 2 genetically identical daughter cells, each diploid with 46 chromosomes. Meiosis produces 4 genetically diverse gametes, each haploid with only 23 chromosomes, half the parent's number, ready for sexual reproduction. When you see signal words like growth, repair, or regeneration, think mitosis and 2 identical cells. When you see gametes, sperm, eggs, or chromosome reduction, think meiosis and 4 diverse cells. That functional anchor will keep them straight under exam pressure. Question 16. Which of the following best describes a homologous pair of chromosomes? Your options are A, 2 identical chromatids joined at centromere. B, 1 chromosome from each X chromosome. C, 2 chromosomes with same genes from parents. D, 2 chromosomes that have undergone mutation. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is C, 2 chromosomes with same genes from parents. C is correct because homologous chromosomes are pairs that carry the same genes in the same order, one inherited from the mother and one from the father. They may carry different alleles for the same gene position. A is wrong because 2 identical chromatids joined at a centromere describe sister chromatids, which form after DNA replication during S phase. Homologous chromosomes are not identical at every position and are not physically joined to each other. B is wrong because sex chromosomes are only one specific homologous pair, and a homologous pair is not limited to one parent or one sex. Homologous chromosomes refer broadly to matching pairs found across all autosomes and sex chromosomes. D is wrong because a mutation refers to a change in a DNA sequence, not to the relationship between 2 chromosomes within a cell. Homologous chromosomes can be normal in sequence and still form a matched pair. 2 of the most confused terms in genetics are sister chromatids and homologous chromosomes. They sound similar, but they describe completely different relationships between chromosomes. Sister chromatids are 2 identical copies of one chromosome, produced during DNA replication and held together at the centromere. They look like an X under a microscope. Homologous chromosomes, by contrast, are a matched pair inherited from 2 different parents, one from mum and one from dad. Every diploid human cell contains 23 pairs of homologous chromosomes. One member of each pair came from the mother, the other from the father. The first 22 pairs are autosomes, identical in size regardless of sex. The 23rd pair, the sex chromosomes, differs. Females have 2 X chromosomes, while males have 1 X and 1 Y. During meiosis, homologous chromosomes pair up in synapses and exchange DNA segments through crossing over, shuffling alleles into new combinations. They separate at anaphase 1, while sister chromatids don't part until anaphase 2, a 2-step process that halves the chromosome number from diploid to haploid. On exam questions, the phrasing tells you which concept is being tested. Words like identical copies or joined at the centromere point to sister chromatids. Phrases like same genes but different alleles, matching pairs, or one from each parent all point to homologous chromosomes. Question 17. A man with type AB blood and a woman with type O blood have a child. Which blood types are possible for the child? Your options are A type A or type B only, B type AB or type O only, C type A, B, AB or O, D type O only. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is A, type A or type B only. A is correct because the father with type AB blood has 1 A allele and 1 B allele, while the mother with type O blood has 2 O alleles. Each child gets 1 allele from each parent overall. B is wrong because type AB requires both an A and a B allele in one child, but the mother can only contribute an O allele. Type O requires 2 O alleles, which the father simply cannot provide. C is wrong because all 4 blood types are not possible from this cross. Type AB requires 2 different alleles from the father plus 1 from the mother, and type O requires 2 O alleles only. D is wrong because type O requires both parents to contribute an O allele to the child during fertilization. The father with type AB has no O allele to pass on, so type O is impossible here. The ABO blood group follows a clean genetic logic built on just 3 alleles. Understanding how those alleles combine explains every possible blood type and lets you predict which type's offspring can and cannot inherit. A and B are codominant with each other. When both are present, both are fully expressed. O is recessive to both, so a person must inherit two O alleles to display type O blood. Each allele directs production of a specific surface protein called an antigen. The A allele makes the A antigen, the B allele makes the B antigen, and the O allele makes no functional antigen at all. Type O cells carry neither antigen, which is why type O is called the universal donor for red cell transfusions. In a cross between a type AB parent and a type O parent, the AB parent contributes either A or B, while the OO parent contributes only O. Every child must be AO or B, meaning type A or type B, and type AB and type O are both impossible outcomes. This AB by O cross is the rare case where no child can share either parent's blood type. Remember, type AB is a case of codominance. Both antigens appear fully, not in complete dominance, where alleles would blend into something new. Question 18. Where in the respiratory tract does gas exchange between air and blood actually occur? Your options are or trachea, B. bronchi, C. alveoli, D. larynx. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is C. Alveoli. C is correct because alveoli are tiny air sacs surrounded by pulmonary capillaries. Their thin walls and large surface area allow oxygen and carbon dioxide to diffuse between air and blood, completing pulmonary gas exchange. A is wrong because the trachea is a conducting airway lined with ciliated pseudostratified epithelium. It transports air to and from the lungs and traps debris in mucus, but does not participate in gas exchange. B is wrong because the bronchi branch from the trachea and conduct air into the lungs through smaller bronchioles. They are part of the conducting zone of the airway, not the respiratory zone where gas exchange occurs. D is wrong because the larynx is the voice box that connects the pharynx to the trachea and houses the vocal cords. It plays a role in airway protection and phonation, but not in gas exchange. Gas exchange, the transfer of oxygen into blood and carbon dioxide out, happens at one specific site in the lungs, the alveoli. Every other part of the airway simply delivers air to this location or protects it from harm. The alveoli achieve this through three key structural features. Their sheer number creates a combined surface area of roughly 70 square meters, about the size of a tennis court. The wall is just a single cell layer thick, and the total distance from alveolar air to capillary blood is less than 1 micrometer, roughly 1/50th the width of a human hair. Oxygen diffuses from the alveolar airspace, where its concentration is high, across the fused basement membranes and into the pulmonary capillary. Carbon dioxide simultaneously travels in the opposite direction. Both gases cross the same ultra-thin membrane at the same moment. The respiratory tract is divided into two zones: the conducting zone, nasal passages, tracheae, and bronchi, warms, filters, and moves air but has walls too thick for gas exchange, forming the anatomical dead space. The respiratory zone, beginning at the respiratory bronchioles and ending in the alveolar ducts and sacs, is where actual gas exchange occurs. The essential contrast to remember is this: ventilation is the bulk movement of air driven by the diaphragm, while respiration in the physiological sense is the molecular exchange of gases at the alveolar surface. The alveoli are exactly where those two processes meet. Question 19. Which of the following best defines an isotope? Your options are A. Atom that has gained or lost electrons. B. Same element with different neutron count. C. Atom with a different proton count. D. Same compound with rearranged bonds. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is B. Same element with different neutron count. B is correct because isotopes share the same proton number, which makes them the same element on the periodic table. They differ in neutron count, which causes them to have different mass numbers but very similar chemical behavior. A is wrong because atoms that gain or lose electrons are called ions and carry net positive or negative charges in solution. They are not isotopes, which involve nuclear differences rather than changes in the surrounding electron cloud structure. C is wrong because atoms with different proton counts represent different elements rather than isotopes of one element. Isotopes share the proton number and element identity, but vary in neutron count and therefore in atomic mass numbers. D is wrong because molecules with rearranged bonds are called isomers, which are different structural forms of the same molecular formula. This term does not apply at the atomic nucleus level the way the term isotope does in chemistry. Isotopes are atoms of the same element that differ in the number of neutrons they carry. Because chemistry depends on electron configuration, and electrons follow proton count, isotopes behave identically in chemical reactions while differing in mass and nuclear stability. Every isotope of an element shares the same proton count, which locks in the atomic number and electron arrangement. The neutron count varies, changing the mass but leaving chemical behavior untouched. Hydrogen's three isotopes illustrate this perfectly. Protium has no neutrons, deuterium has one, and tritium has two, and is radioactive. All three carry one proton and one electron, so all three react as hydrogen. Only their masses differ. The classic exam trap is mixing up isotopes with ions, isomers, and different elements. Ions change electron count and gain a charge. Isomers rearrange atoms within a molecule. Different elements have entirely different proton counts. Only isotopes keep the same protons while varying neutrons. When an exam item mentions atoms of the same element with different atomic masses, or a non-whole number atomic mass on the periodic table, that is your signal, isotopes. Charge changes point to ions, proton changes point to new elements entirely. Question 20. The cardiac unit reported a case of bradycardia in an elderly patient. The provider ordered telemetry monitoring and a workup to identify any reversible cause before considering a pacemaker. Based on the prefix Brady and the root cardia, the word bradycardia most likely refers to. Your options are A. Slow heart rate, B. Fast heart rate, C. Enlarged heart, D. Heart muscle inflammation. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is A. Slow heart rate. A is correct because the prefix Brady means slow and the root cardia refers to the heart, so the term means slow heart rate, which matches the workup for reversible causes and the possible pacemaker the team is considering. B is wrong because fast heart rate is described by the prefix tachy, not Brady. So this option inverts the prefix's standard meaning and does not match the workup the passage describes for this elderly patient. C is wrong because enlarged heart is described by the root cardia combined with megaly or another size root, not with Brady. So this option misreads the prefix that actually appears in the medical word given. D is wrong because inflammation of the heart muscle is described by the suffix etis as in myocarditis, not by the prefix Brady. So this option misses the relevant word parts present in the term entirely. Medical terminology is built from meaningful pieces, and once you know those pieces, you can decode words you have never seen before. This section focuses on the prefix pair Brady and tachy, which appear wherever rate or speed is being described clinically. Every clinical term combines a prefix at the front, a root carrying the core concept, and a suffix that signals the type of condition or structure. Recognizing each piece independently lets you assemble the meaning of even unfamiliar words. Brady comes from Greek for slow and tachy from Greek for swift. They are mirror opposites, just like hypo and hyper. Bradycardia means a heart rate below 60 beats per minute, while tachycardia means a rate above 100. The root cardia refers to the heart. When bradycardia is persistent and not explained by athletic conditioning, clinicians look for reversible causes including beta blockers, calcium channel blockers, electrolyte imbalances, and hypothyroidism before considering a permanent pacemaker. On exam items, the trap is reaching for any cardiac-sounding answer rather than reading the actual prefix. Enlarged heart is cardiomegaly, inflammation is myocarditis, and fast rate is tachycardia. Decoding the prefix and root precisely is what separates the correct answer from the distractor. Question 21. Which of the following pairs correctly matches the prefix with its general meaning? Your options are: A. Milli means 1,000 times larger. B. Centi means 10 times larger. C. Kilo means 1,000 times the base. D. Mega means smaller than the base. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is C. Kilo means 1,000 times the base. C is correct because kilo means 1,000 times the base unit during measurement. So a kilogram represents 1,000 grams and a kilometer represents 1,000 meters. Used commonly in scientific measurement work everywhere today in science. A is wrong because milli denotes a value much smaller than the base unit, not larger as the option claims. The prefix represents 1,000th of the base rather than a 1,000-fold multiplication of the base unit during measurement. B is wrong because centi represents 100th of the base unit during measurement. This indicates a smaller fraction rather than a multiply that makes the unit larger by any factor of 10 during scientific measurement work. D is wrong because mega indicates 1,000,000 times the base unit during measurement, which makes any quantity much larger rather than smaller. The prefix is widely used for very large measurements like megawatts or megahertz in physics. Metric prefixes let a single base unit stretch from the subatomic to the astronomical. Each prefix is simply a power of 10 attached to the front of the unit, which is what makes the metric system the international language of science. The prefix ladder runs from nano at 1 billionth, through micro, milli, and centi below the base, up through kilo at 1,000, and mega at 1,000,000. Every step between adjacent prefixes is a factor of 10. Notice that kilo, mega, and giga are each 1,000-fold apart from one another, and the same is true descending through milli, micro, and nano. The structure is perfectly symmetric around the base unit. The most dangerous mix-up is milli versus micro. Both abbreviate to M and both represent fractions, but micro is 1,000 times smaller than milli in a medication dose calculation. Swapping them shifts the dose by 1,000-fold, which is why prefix mastery is drilled so hard in pharmacy and nursing programs. Whenever an exam question links two metric units, immediately rank them by their powers of 10 and ask how many 1,000-fold steps separate them. Consistent prefix fluency is what makes dosage conversions safe and exam calculations fast. Question 22. Which temperature scale uses absolute zero as its lowest possible value? Your options are A. Celsius, B. Fahrenheit, C. Rankine only, D. Kelvin. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is D. Kelvin. D is correct because Kelvin sets its 0 point at absolute zero, the theoretical limit where particle motion stops entirely. This anchoring makes Kelvin the standard scientific scale used universally throughout chemistry and physics work today. A is wrong because Celsius places its 0 point at the freezing point of water, well above absolute zero. The scale includes negative values for cold conditions and is therefore not anchored at the lowest possible temperature limit. B is wrong because Fahrenheit places its 0 on a historical brine reference point and allows many negative values for cold conditions. It is not anchored to absolute zero, the theoretical minimum temperature in physical reality. C is wrong because Rankine is also anchored to absolute zero in physics, but the question asks for the standard scientific scale. Kelvin is the universally accepted answer used throughout chemistry and physics by scientists everywhere today. Temperature scales differ not just in convenience but in what their 0 point represents. That choice of 0 is what separates everyday scales from the one physics actually requires. The Kelvin scale is anchored to absolute zero, the lowest possible temperature in the universe. At this point, all classical thermal motion of atoms and molecules ceases and entropy reaches its minimum, making 0 Kelvin the only zero that corresponds to zero thermal energy. The four common scales split along two axes, where 0 sits and how large each degree is. Kelvin and Rankine both anchor to absolute zero, while Celsius anchors to water's freezing point and Fahrenheit to a brine solution. Kelvin and Celsius share the same degree size. Fahrenheit and Rankine share a smaller degree size. Kelvin and Celsius are identical in degree size, but shifted by 273.15. Water freezes at 273.15 K and 0 degrees. It boils at 303.15 K and 100 degrees. The offset is fixed, so converting between them is always just adding or subtracting that constant. In fundamental equations like the ideal gas law, temperature appears multiplicatively, so 0 must mean zero energy. That is why Kelvin is required in physics, chemistry, and engineering calculations, while Celsius and Fahrenheit remain tools for everyday measurement. Question 23. Which type of bond involves the sharing of electron pairs between atoms? Your options are E. Ionic bond, B. Hydrogen bond only, C. Covalent bond, D. Metallic bond. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is C. Covalent bond. C is correct because covalent bonds form when atoms share one or more pairs of electrons between them in a molecule. This sharing allows each atom to achieve a stable outer electron configuration without transferring electrons completely between atoms. O is wrong because ionic bonds form when electrons transfer from one atom to another, which creates oppositely charged ions that attract. Ionic bonds do not involve any mutual sharing of electron pairs between bonds atoms in a molecule. B is wrong because hydrogen bonds are weak intermolecular attractions between polar molecules in solution or in pure substances. They are not true chemical bonds formed by the mutual sharing of electron pairs between two atoms in chemistry. D is wrong because metallic bonds involve a sea of delocalized electrons shared among many metal atoms throughout the lattice. This differs fundamentally from the discrete electron pair sharing between two specific atoms that defines covalent bonding in chemistry. Chemical bonds form when atoms interact through their valence electrons. The key question is always the same. Do atoms transfer electrons, share them, or release them into a communal pool? Understanding that distinction unlocks most of chemistry. 3 bond types govern ordinary chemistry. Ionic bonds involve full electron transfer between atoms. Covalent bonds share electrons between atoms. Metallic bonds release electrons into a delocalized sea. In every case, atoms are trying to achieve a stable, full outer electron shell, the octet rule. Covalent bonds scale with how many electron pairs are shared. A single bond shares 1 pair, a double bond shares 2, and a triple bond shares 3. More shared pairs means a shorter, stronger bond, which is why nitrogen gas with its triple bond, is remarkably chemically inert. When identical atoms bond, electrons are shared equally, a nonpolar covalent bond. When atoms of different electronegativity bond, the more electronegative atom pulls the electrons closer, creating partial charges. This is a polar covalent bond, and it explains why water, with its two polar oxygen-hydrogen bonds, is such a powerful solvent. On any exam, the language tells you everything. Sharing electron pairs points to covalent bonds. Transfer of electrons and formation of ions points to ionic bonds. A sea of electrons points to metallic bonds. Match the mechanism to the vocabulary and you will never confuse them. Question 24. Which process during meiosis is a major source of genetic variation among offspring? Your options are A. DNA replication during S phase, B. Crossing over during prophase R, C. Cytokinesis at the end of telophase, D. Spindle fiber formation. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is B. Crossing over during prophase R. B is correct because crossing over occurs during prophase celular of meiosis, when homologous chromosomes exchange segments of DNA. This recombination shuffles alleles between maternal and paternal chromosomes, creating new combinations of genes in each gamete. A is wrong because DNA replication during S phase produces identical copies of each chromosome and does not create variation by itself. It must occur before meiosis, but is not the source of genetic differences among gametes. C is wrong because cytokinesis is the physical splitting of the cytoplasm to produce two daughter cells. It distributes the already separated chromosomes, but it does not change the genetic content of the cells being produced during meiosis. D is wrong because spindle fiber formation provides the machinery to move chromosomes during division steps. While it is essential to the process, it does not by itself rearrange genetic material to create variation among offspring during sexual reproduction. Meiosis is the engine of genetic diversity, and at its heart lies a powerful mechanism called crossing over. Understanding how it works explains why siblings from the same parents can look so different from one another. Meiosis produces genetic variation through three distinct mechanisms: crossing over, independent assortment, and random fertilization. Together they ensure that virtually every gamete carries a unique genetic blueprint. During prophecy, homologous chromosomes pair up in a process called synapsis, held precisely together by the synaptonymal complex. Enzymes then cut DNA at points called chiasmata, swapping segments between the maternal and paternal chromosomes to produce recombinant chromosomes, each a mosaic of both parents. Without crossing over, alleles on the same chromosome would always be inherited together. By breaking these linkage groups, crossing over allows entirely new allele combinations to appear, combinations that existed in neither grandparent, giving natural selection far more raw material to work with. Remember, crossing over physically rearranges DNA during prophase A, producing recombinant chromosomes with novel allele combinations. Combined with independent assortment and random fertilization, it explains the virtually limitless genetic diversity we see among humans. Question 25. The home care nurse described the wound as superficial. It involved only the outermost skin, did not reach the deeper layers, and would heal in days without sutures. The patient, alarmed by the bleeding, was relieved to hear the nurse's assessment. In the passage, the word superficial most likely means. Your options are A. Infected and painful, B. Wide and ragged, C. Deep and serious, D. Affecting only the surface. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is D. Affecting only the surface. D is correct because the passage explicitly states the wound involved only the outermost skin and did not reach deeper layers, which matches affecting only the surface and uses example clues that confirm the synonym directly. Is wrong because infection is not mentioned anywhere in the passage, and the wound is described as healing quickly without sutures. So adding infected and painful introduces, meaning the surrounding context never supports for the word. B is wrong because the passage does not describe the shape of the wound at all, and width is not the attribute the targeted word concerns. So this option points to an unrelated dimension of the injury. C is wrong because deep and serious is the direct opposite of what the passage describes, since the writer specifies the wound did not reach deeper layers, which rules out this antonym as a possible synonym here. When a test asks about an unfamiliar word, the passage itself is your dictionary. Every targeted word sits inside a paragraph loaded with clues, and your job is to extract those clues rather than rely on outside knowledge. Writers typically signal a word's meaning through the scene surrounding it. For wound vocabulary, watch for 3 types of detail: the location and depth of the injury, the severity of bleeding or damage, and what treatment is or isn't required. The word superficial means affecting only the surface. In wound terms, limited to the epidermis without reaching the dermis, fat, or muscle below. A passage describing a superficial wound will use phrases like outermost skin, did not reach deeper layers, or no sutures required, all of which confirm that surface level meaning. Watch out for 2 traps. First, a choice that adds plausible but textually unsupported attributes. Superficial does not automatically mean infected or painful unless the passage says so. Second, the antonym trap. Deep and serious uses wound vocabulary but contradicts the passage's explicit statement that the wound did not reach deeper layers. This skill generalizes to any vocabulary question, medical or otherwise. Ask which choice best fits what the passage directly states and eliminate anything the text does not support. Surface level reading finds surface level answers. Go deeper with the clues the writer already gave you. Question 26. After major surgery, the patient was lethargic for the first day. He drifted in and out of sleep, answered questions slowly, and made little effort to move on his own. By the second morning, his energy had returned, and he sat up unaided. In the passage, the word lethargic most likely means. Your options are A. Energetic and alert. B. Drowsy and sluggish. C. Anxious and restless. D. Hungry and irritable. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is B. Drowsy and sluggish. B is correct because the details of drifting in and out of sleep, slow answers, and little effort to move all point to drowsy and sluggish as the meaning, and the energy recovery on day 2 confirms the contrast. A is wrong because the passage contrasts the first day's state with the next morning's returned energy. So the word the writer needs must mean the opposite of energetic and alert rather than match it. C is wrong because the passage describes minimal movement and slow responses, which are the opposite of restless behavior. So anxious and restless would not match the body language the writer is depicting on the first day. D is wrong because hunger and irritability are not described in the passage at all, and inserting emotional or appetite content here introduces meaning. The surrounding context never supports for the targeted word in the brief excerpt given. When a passage describes a physical or mental state, the surrounding details are your map to meaning. Skilled readers collect those clues rather than relying on memorized definitions alone. Lethargic means drowsy and sluggish, a state of reduced energy. A passage will surround the word with images like drifting in and out of sleep, answering slowly, and making little effort to move. Details that together lock in the meaning. In clinical settings, lethargy sits on a spectrum. Above it is full alertness. Below it are obtundation, stupor, and coma. A lethargic patient can be roused briefly, but quickly drifts back. A meaningful distinction in any neurological assessment. The exam places tempting distractors alongside the correct answer. Energetic and alert is a direct antonym. Anxious and restless implies high activity. Hungry and irritable adds emotion the passage never describes. Only drowsy and sluggish matches a scene of slow, reduced engagement. Every word for a physical state sits inside a web of descriptive clues. Train yourself to gather those clues first, and the meaning, whether lethargic or any unfamiliar word, will confirm itself. Question 27. Where in the body is most vitamin K produced for use in blood clotting? Your options are A. Liver, B. Lungs, C. Gallbladder, D. Large intestine. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is D. Large intestine. D is correct because bacteria living in the large intestine synthesize vitamin K, which is then absorbed across the colonic wall into the blood. Vitamin K is essential for the production of several clotting factors in the liver. A is wrong because the liver uses vitamin K to produce several clotting factors and stores fat-soluble vitamins. It does not synthesize vitamin K itself, however, and serves mainly as a site of action and storage. B is wrong because the lungs are the primary site of gas exchange between air and blood. They have no role in producing vitamins for use elsewhere in the body and do not synthesize or absorb vitamin K. C is wrong because the gallbladder stores and concentrates bile produced by the liver and releases it into the small intestine to emulsify fats. It does not synthesize vitamin K, although bile aids absorption of fat-soluble vitamins. Vitamin K is a fat-soluble vitamin essential for blood clotting and bone metabolism. Unlike most vitamins that come purely from diet, the body has two distinct sources of vitamin K, and understanding both is key to understanding deficiency and disease. Dietary vitamin K1 comes primarily from leafy green vegetables and is absorbed in the small intestine with bile salts. Vitamin K2, called menaquinone, is synthesized by bacteria in the large intestine as a byproduct of their own metabolism, and a portion is absorbed through the colonic wall into the bloodstream. In the liver, vitamin K acts as a cofactor for a reaction that adds a carboxyl group to glutamic acid residues on clotting factors 2, 7, 9, and 10, as well as proteins C and S. This carboxylation allows these factors to bind calcium and participate in the clotting cascade. Without enough vitamin K, these factors are produced in non-functional forms and clotting is impaired. Several clinical scenarios lead to vitamin K deficiency. Newborns are especially vulnerable. They have sterile guts at birth with no bacteria yet, low vitamin K stores, and breast milk is relatively low in vitamin K. Long-term antibiotics can wipe out the gut flora that produce it. Liver disease impairs both storage and clotting factor synthesis. Warfarin blocks the recycling of vitamin K back to its active form. The key chain to remember is that gut bacteria in the large intestine synthesize vitamin K2. The liver uses it to carboxylate clotting factors, and anything disrupting this chain, antibiotics, liver disease, or warfarin, can produce a bleeding tendency measurable as a prolonged prothrombin time. Question 28. The note read, post-operative oliguria persisted despite adequate fluids, prompting the team to recheck creatinine. The renal consult was concerned about acute kidney injury and ordered urgent imaging. Based on the prefix olig and the root uria, the word oliguria most likely refers to. Your options are A. Painful urination, B. Frequent urination, C. Reduced urine output, D. Blood in the urine. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is C, reduced urine output. C is correct because the prefix olig means few and the root urea refers to urine, so the term means reduced urine output, which matches the team's concern about kidney injury and the rising creatinine the note describes here. A is wrong because painful urination is described by dysuria, where the prefix dis means difficult or painful, and olig means few or scant rather than painful. So this option misreads the prefix used in the actual medical term. B is wrong because frequent urination is described by polyuria, where poly means many or excessive, and orly means the opposite of poly, so this option inverts the prefix's standard meaning in a way that fails the analysis. D is wrong because blood in urine is described by hematuria, where hemat refers to blood, and olive in this question refers to amount rather than blood content, so this option misses the actual word parts in use. When a medical term looks unfamiliar, the fastest path to its meaning is breaking it into Greek or Latin word parts. Oliguria is a perfect example of this decoding strategy in action. The prefix olig comes from the Greek oligos, meaning few or scant, combined with urea, meaning urine. Oliguria literally means too little urine, clinically defined as less than 400 milliliters per 24 hours in adults. Causes are divided into three categories. Pre-renal means reduced blood flow to the kidneys from dehydration or shock. Intrarenal means damage to kidney tissue itself. Post-renal means obstruction of urine flow downstream, such as a blocked ureter or enlarged prostate. Each cause category maps to a distinct anatomical location along the urinary pathway, from the blood supply arriving at the kidney, to the kidney tissue itself, to the outflow tract below it. The same decoding logic applies across related terms. Anuria means no urine output. Polyuria means excessive output. Dysuria means painful urination. Reading the actual prefix in any question, not just recognizing a urinary word, is what separates the right answer from a trap. Question 29. Which type of error appears in this sentence? The new clinical instructor is patient, knowledgeable, and explains things clearly to nursing students every week. Your options are A, splice, B, run-on sentence, C, subject-verb mismatch, D, faulty parallelism. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is D, faulty parallelism. D is correct because faulty parallelism is correct because the list mixes two adjectives, patient and knowledgeable, with a verb phrase, explains things clearly. All items must share grammatical form, so a third adjective, such as clear, would fix. A is wrong because comma splice joins two independent clauses with only a comma. The commas in the sentence separate items in a list, not two complete clauses, so the comma splice label does not apply. B is wrong because run-on sentence joins independent clauses without punctuation. This sentence contains only one independent clause that lists qualities of the clinical instructor. So the run-on label does not describe what is wrong here. C is wrong because subject-verb mismatch is when subject and verb disagree in number. The verb correctly agrees with its singular subject instructor in the sentence. So subject-verb agreement is not the problem in any predicate elements. Faulty parallelism doesn't just appear in lists of activities. It shows up just as often in lists of qualities. The same core rule applies. Every item in a series must share the same grammatical form. Whether your list contains adjectives, nouns, or verb phrases, every item must belong to the same category. Mixing types. Say, two adjectives followed by a verb phrase breaks the parallel pattern and makes the sentence feel off, even when the meaning is obvious. Take this classic example. The instructor is patient, knowledgeable, and explains things clearly. The first two items are adjectives. The third is a verb phrase. The fix is simple. Rewrite the third item as an adjective: patient, knowledgeable, and clear. All three now share the same form, and the sentence reads smoothly. When reviewing a sentence, look for any list of three or more items separated by commas with a final and or. Compare the grammatical form of each item. If one item is a verb phrase where the others are adjectives, that's the error, and the fix is to rewrite so all items share the same category. Parallelists feel natural because the brain processes a repeating pattern automatically. Non-parallelists feel jarring because the brain has to reset mid-sentence. Keeping all items in the same grammatical category restores both rhythm and clarity. Question 30. Which sentence is grammatically correct? Sentence 1. After completing rounds, the nurse updated the patients. Sentence 2. After completing rounds, the patients were updated by the nurse. Sentence 3. After completing rounds, an update was given to patients. Sentence 4. After completing rounds, updates were provided to patients. Your options are A. Sentence 1, B. Sentence 2, C. Sentence 3, D. Sentence 4. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is A. Sentence 1. A is correct because sentence 1 places the nurse, who logically performs the action of completing rounds, immediately after the introductory phrase. The modifier attaches correctly to the doer, so the sentence is grammatically clear and standard in form. B is wrong because sentence 2 has a dangly modifier because the patients did not complete rounds. The introductory phrase incorrectly attaches to the patients, the subject of the clause, creating an illogical relationship between modifier and actor here. C is wrong because sentence 3 has a dangly modifier because an update cannot complete rounds. The subject following the introductory phrase fails to be the actor of completing, so the modifier is left dangling without a logical attachment. D is wrong because sentence 4 has a dangly modifier because updates cannot complete rounds. The subject does not match the implied actor of the introductory phrase, breaking grammar. A revised version requires placing the nurse in subject position. Modifier errors are among the trickiest grammar problems on standardized exams because the sentences often sound nearly correct at first. Understanding the structural difference between dangling and misplaced modifiers is the key to catching and fixing them. A correctly placed modifier sits immediately beside the word it describes. A misplaced modifier is present in the sentence but positioned next to the wrong word, creating an unintended meaning. A dangling modifier is more severe. The word it logically describes has been omitted from the sentence altogether. In a dangling modifier, the introductory phrase has no logical subject to attach to. The performer has been pushed out of the subject position. In a misplaced modifier, the word is present but in the wrong spot, so it restricts the wrong part of the sentence. To fix any modifier error, first ask who is actually performing the introductory action. For a dangling modifier, rewrite the main clause to promote that performer to subject. For a misplaced modifier, simply move the modifier like only or just, so it sits directly next to the word it is meant to restrict. Every modifier must touch the word it describes. If that word is missing, the modifier dangles. If that word is present but far away, the modifier is misplaced. Spot the performer, check the subject, and the fix becomes clear. Question 31. Which hormone surge from the anterior pituitary triggers ovulation during the menstrual cycle? Your options are A. Estrogen, B. Progesterone, C. Luteinizing hormone, D. Follicle stimulating hormone. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is C. Luteinizing hormone. C is correct because A, sharp surge of luteinizing hormone from the anterior pituitary at mid-cycle triggers ovulation. It causes the mature dominant follicle to rupture, releasing the secondary oocyte from the ovary into the fallopian tube. It is wrong because estrogen levels rise during the follicular phase as a dominant follicle develops and contribute to the luteinizing hormone surge through positive feedback. Estrogen alone, however, does not directly trigger the release of an oocyte. B is wrong because progesterone is secreted mainly by the corpus luteum after ovulation has already occurred. It maintains the uterine lining for possible implantation, but is not the hormone whose mid-cycle surge causes ovulation each cycle. D is wrong because follicle-stimulating hormone promotes development of ovarian follicles during the early follicular phase. Its levels rise modestly at mid-cycle, but it does not, on its own, trigger ovulation in the same way as luteinizing hormone. The menstrual cycle is controlled by a coordinated hormonal dialogue between the hypothalamus, the anterior pituitary, and the ovaries. Understanding each phase and its dominant hormone is key to understanding how ovulation occurs. The cycle is divided into 3 phases: the follicular phase, ovulation, and the luteal phase. The follicular phase is driven by FSH, which stimulates ovarian follicles to develop, while the dominant follicle produces rising estrogen that thickens the uterine lining. 4 hormones divide the work. FSH develops follicles early in the cycle. Rising estrogen triggers a positive feedback surge of luteinizing hormone at mid-cycle, which causes the dominant follicle to rupture and release the egg. After ovulation, the corpus luteum produces progesterone to maintain the endometrium. The LH surge is the pivotal mid-cycle event, a sharp spike over roughly 36 hours that triggers enzymatic digestion of the follicle wall, completes the oocyte's first meiotic division, and releases the egg into the fallopian tube. The ruptured follicle then becomes the corpus luteum. If an exam question mentions surge, mid-cycle trigger, or follicular rupture, the answer is luteinizing hormone. FSH builds the follicle, estrogen thickens the lining, and progesterone maintains it, but only the LH surge causes ovulation. Question 32. Which type of error appears in this sentence? The nurse only gave the patient 1 tablet at bedtime last night without comment. Your options are a run-on sentence, B, misplaced modifier, C, sentence fragment, D, faulty parallelism. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is B, misplaced modifier. B is correct because misplaced modifier is correct because only sits next to gave, suggesting only the act of giving. The intended meaning places only before 1 tablet, indicating the limited quantity rather than restricting the action verb here. A is wrong because run-on sentence joins 2 independent clauses without proper punctuation. This sentence contains a single independent clause, so run-on label does not apply. There is no second clause for the first to merge with. C is wrong because sentence fragment refers to an incomplete thought. This sentence has a clear subject, verb, and object expressing a complete idea by itself. The fragment label requires missing essential elements that this sentence has not lost. D is wrong because faulty parallelism occurs when items in a series do not share grammatical form. No list of items appears in the sentence to evaluate parallel structure, so parallelism cannot be the error. One of the most commonly tested grammar traps is the misplaced modifier, a word placed next to the wrong part of a sentence, silently shifting the meaning. The word only is the most frequent offender on standardized exams. The core rule is simple: a modifier must sit next to the word it modifies. Shifting only from next to the verb to next to the quantity to next to the subject produces 3 completely different sentences. Minatson, each grammatically intact but logically distinct. Each placement of only is grammatically possible, but only one matches any given intended meaning. The writer must ask, which element am I actually restricting? The doer, the action, the quantity, or the result? Misplaced and dangling modifiers are related but distinct errors. A misplaced modifier can be fixed by moving it. A dangling modifier requires rewriting the sentence to name the performer. On the exam, spotting signal words like only, just, almost, or nearly should prompt you to check placement immediately. Question 33. If both parents are heterozygous for a trait, what is the probability the offspring is homozygous recessive? Your options are A. 0%, B. 50%, C. 75%, D. 25%. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is D, 25%. D is correct because a cross between two heterozygous parents gives a 1 to 2 to 1 genotype ratio. That means 25% homozygous dominant, 50% heterozygous, and 25% homologous recessive offspring on average overall. A is wrong because heterozygous parents both carry one recessive allele each, so passing two recessive alleles to a child is possible. The probability is therefore not zero, and homozygous recessive offspring can clearly occur. B is wrong because 50% represents the probability of a heterozygous offspring, not a homozygous recessive one. Among offspring from a heterozygous cross, half are heterozygous, while only a quarter are homozygous recessive in any cross. C is wrong because 75% represents the probability of having the dominant phenotype, which combines homozygous dominant and heterozygous offspring. This is the chance of dominant appearance, not specifically homozygous recessive offspring after a Punnett square analysis. When two heterozygous parents each carry one dominant and one recessive allele, we can predict exactly what proportion of their offspring will inherit each genotype and phenotype. This is one of the most fundamental scenarios in Mendelian genetics. Setting up the Punnett square, we place one parent's alleles across the top and the others down the side. Each of the four cells represents an equally likely outcome, giving genotypes AA, and us a 1 to 2 to 1 genotype ratio. With complete dominance, both AA and AA individuals display the dominant phenotype, so 75% of offspring show the dominant trait and only 25% show the recessive trait, the classic 3 to 1 phenotype ratio. This 25% probability underlies carrier screening for autosomal recessive conditions like cystic fibrosis and sickle cell disease. Critically, each pregnancy is an independent event. A couple who already has an affected child still faces a 1 in 4 chance with every subsequent conception. When an exam question mentions heterozygous cross, both parents carriers, or probability of recessive offspring, recognize these as signals pointing to the 1/4 probability for homozygous recessive and the 3 to 1 phenotypic ratio. Question 34. The discharge summary listed dysphagia among the patient's persistent symptoms after his recent stroke. The speech therapist scheduled swallowing studies and recommended thickened liquids until further evaluation. Based on the prefix dys and the root phag, the word dysphagia most likely refers to. Your options are A. Difficulty breathing, B. Painful urination, C. Difficulty swallowing, D. Excessive sweating. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is C. Difficulty swallowing. C is correct because the prefix dys means difficult or impaired, and the root phag refers to eating or swallowing, so the term means difficulty swallowing, which matches the swallowing studies and thickened liquids the team prescribed. A is wrong because difficulty breathing is described by the term dyspnea, where the root pnea refers to breath, and the root vowel in this question refers instead to eating or swallowing. So this option misses the relevant root. B is wrong because painful urination is described by the term dysuria, where the root refers to urine, and the root vowel in this question is unrelated to urinary function. So this option misses the actual word part used. D is wrong because excessive sweating is described by hyperhidrosis, where roots refer to water and sweat, and the root vowel does not refer to sweat at all. So this option fails the word part analysis the question requires. The prefix dis comes from Greek, meaning bad, difficult, or painful. Whenever you see dis at the front of a medical term, it signals that something is functioning poorly or is impaired, not absent, but disrupted. The root vowel comes from the Greek phagein, meaning to eat or swallow. You can spot it in phagocyte and esophagus. Combine dis with phag and you get dysphagia, the clinical term for difficulty swallowing. Swallowing is a complex sequence involving more than 30 muscles and several cranial nerves. Food travels from the mouth through the pharynx, past the airway opening and into the esophagus. Any breakdown in this coordination produces dysphagia, which can range from mild discomfort to dangerous aspiration. Dysphagia has many causes. Neurological causes include stroke, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, and ALS, all of which impair the muscle control needed for safe swallowing. Structural causes include esophageal strictures, tumors, and motility disorders like achalasia. The same prefix logic applies across many clinical terms. Dyspnea is difficulty breathing. Dysuria is painful urination. Dysarthria is difficulty speaking. And dyslexia is difficulty reading. Remember, dys means impaired function, while the prefix a or n means the function is absent entirely, as in aphasia versus dysphagia. Question 35. The neurology consult reported a patient with hemiplegia following a stroke affecting the right hemisphere of the brain. The team began range of motion exercises and planned long-term rehabilitation. Based on the prefix hemi and the root pleg, the word hemiplegia most likely refers to. Your options are A. Loss of speech, B. Loss of vision, C. Paralysis of all four limbs, D. Paralysis of one side. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is D. Paralysis of one side. D is correct because the prefix hemi means half, and the root pleg refers to paralysis, so the term means paralysis of one side of the body, which matches the right hemisphere stroke and the range of motion exercises described. A is wrong because loss of speech is described by aphasia, where the root refers to speech, and the prefix hemi and root pleg here concern movement rather than spoken language, so this option misses the roots involved. B is wrong because loss of vision is described by terms with roots such as opia, not pleg, and hemi modifies the side of body affected, so this option does not match the word parts in the term. C is wrong because paralysis of all four limbs is described by quadriplegia, where the prefix quadri means four, and hemi means half rather than four, so this option misreads the prefix that appears in the actual medical word. When one side of the brain is damaged by a stroke, the effects appear on the opposite side of the body. This crossed wiring is called contralateral organization, and it is one of the defining features of how the vertebrate brain controls movement. A right hemisphere stroke causes left-sided weakness, and a left hemisphere stroke causes right-sided weakness. The corpus callosum connects the two hemispheres but does not override this cross-control. The affected side of the body is always opposite to the side of the brain lesion. The word hemiplegia decomposes neatly. Hemi means half, and plegia comes from the Greek for stroke or paralysis. Combined, The term describes paralysis of the half of the body contralateral to the brain injury, making it one of the most common and recognizable consequences of stroke. Other paralysis terms follow the same prefix logic. Para means beside and applies to both legs in spinal cord injury. Mono applies to a single limb. Quadri or tetra means four, covering all limbs. Knowing the prefix instantly identifies which limbs are affected, making these terms precise diagnostic shorthand. The key clinical rule is simple. The paralyzed side is always opposite the brain lesion. Do not confuse hemiplegia with aphasia, hemianopia, or quadriplegia. Each has a distinct term for a distinct deficit. Match the prefix to the pattern and the diagnosis follows. Question 36. Which of the following best describes the purpose of dimensional analysis? Your options are: A. Predicts reaction products. B. Converts between units using factors. C. Balances oxidation half reactions. D. Identifies elements from spectra. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is B. Converts between units using factors. B is correct because dimensional analysis converts quantities between units by multiplying by ratios that equal 1. This procedure allows units to cancel correctly, so only the desired unit remains in the final answer for the calculation. It is wrong because predicting reaction products requires knowledge of reactivity, periodic trends, and reaction types in chemistry. None of these skills are part of unit conversion using ratio-based factors that cancel and produce a desired unit. C is wrong because balancing redox half reactions involves equalizing electrons gained and lost between species during the reaction. This task is unrelated to converting measured quantities from one set of units to another using ratio-based factors. D is wrong because spectral identification matches emission lines to characteristic patterns of elements in atomic physics. This technique has nothing to do with converting between metric or imperial units using factor set equal to 1 in chemistry. Dimensional analysis is a universal problem-solving technique built on one powerful idea: multiplying a quantity by a carefully chosen ratio equal to 1 changes its units without changing its value. The conversion factor is simply a ratio of two equal measurements. Because the ratio equals 1, multiplying by it transforms only the unit expression, not the quantity itself. Chaining several factors together cancels each unwanted unit step by step until only the desired unit remains. Here, the unit foot in the original quantity cancels against the foot in the denominator of the first conversion factor, leaving inches. A second factor then cancels inches, yielding centimeters. Each step is a simple multiplication. The cancellation of units confirms the setup is correct. 3 principles keep dimensional analysis reliable. The unwanted units cancel across numerator and denominator. Every conversion factor equals exactly 1. And because of that, the true value of the quantity is always preserved throughout the chain. Writing units alongside every number is the key habit. If the units do not cancel cleanly, the setup contains an error. Catching a misplaced factor before doing arithmetic saves time and prevents costly mistakes in clinical and laboratory work. Question 37. Which kidney process moves substances from the glomerular blood into the renal tubule to begin urine formation? Your options are: A. Glomerular filtration. B. Tubular reabsorption. C. Tubular secretion. D. Micturition. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is A. Glomerular filtration. A is correct because glomerular filtration moves water and small solids from blood in the glomerular capillaries into the capsular space under hydrostatic pressure. This filtrate is the starting fluid for urine formation in each nephron of the kidney. B is wrong because tubular reabsorption returns water, glucose, ions, and other useful substances from the tubule back into peritubular blood. It refines the filtrate after filtration but does not initiate the process of urine formation. C is wrong because tubular secretion moves additional wastes, drugs, and ions from peritubular blood into the tubule for elimination. It supplements filtration in clearing substances from the blood but is not the first step of urine formation. D is wrong because micturition is the process of urination, in which urine is expelled from the bladder through the urethra. It occurs after urine has already been produced by the nephrons and stored in the urinary bladder. Glomerular filtration is the first step in urine formation and the foundation of how the kidney cleans the blood. Understanding its structure and mechanics explains both normal kidney function and what goes wrong in kidney disease. The glomerulus is a tuft of capillaries nestled inside Bowman's capsule. Blood enters through the wider afferent arteriole and exits through the narrower efferent arteriole. That size difference creates high capillary pressure, which physically forces water and small solutes into the capsular space as filtrate. The filtration barrier has 3 layers: the fenestrated endothelium, the basement membrane, and the slit diaphragms of podocytes. Small molecules like glucose, ions, and urea pass freely. Large molecules like albumin and red blood cells are blocked. Their appearance in urine signals barrier damage. The glomerular filtration rate averages about 120 milliliters per minute, producing roughly 180 liters of filtrate daily. The body cannot afford to lose that volume, so the nephron reabsorbs the vast majority, leaving only 1 to 2 liters to be excreted as urine each day. Filtration is just the starting point. Reabsorption returns water, glucose, and sodium from the tubule back into the blood. Secretion adds waste and drugs from the blood into the tubular fluid. Together with concentration in the loop of Henle, these steps refine filtrate into the final urine. Question 38. Which of the following correctly distinguishes genotype from phenotype? Your options are: A. Genotype is the observable trait. B. Genotype is the genetic makeup. C. Genotype and phenotype are the same. D. Genotype refers only to dominant alleles. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is B. Genotype is the genetic makeup. B is correct because genotype refers to the actual combination of alleles an organism inherits for a particular gene, while phenotype is the observable trait that results, such as eye color or blood type seen in the individual. A is wrong because this option reverses the definitions of the two terms. The observable physical trait is the phenotype, and the underlying allele combination is the genotype, not the other way around as stated in this answer choice. C is wrong because genotype and phenotype refer to two different concepts that should not be used interchangeably. The genotype is the genetic code, while the phenotype is the trait that is expressed and observable in the organism overall. D is wrong because both genotype and phenotype can involve dominant and recessive alleles within a given individual. Genotype includes any combination of alleles, and phenotype reflects the trait that results, regardless of which alleles are dominant or recessive. Genetics separates the genetic instructions an organism carries from the observable traits those instructions produce. These two concepts, genotype and phenotype, are distinct, and mixing them up causes errors throughout any inheritance problem. The genotype is the actual allele combination in the DNA for a simple dominant recessive gene. Genotypes are written as AA, or A, one allele from each parent, and cannot be seen directly without molecular analysis. The phenotype is whatever can be seen, measured, or detected. Eye color, blood type, height, flower color. Phenotype is the outward expression of the genotype, and it can also be shaped by environmental factors like nutrition or sun exposure. How genotype maps to phenotype depends on the dominance pattern. With complete dominance, AA and AA share the same phenotype. Codominance, like AB blood type, displays both alleles at once. Incomplete dominance produces a blended phenotype, like pink from red and white parents. Incomplete dominance in flower color is a perfect model. Each genotype, KTDT, SIM, ED, RA, RA, and R, maps to a unique phenotype, red, pink, or white. In complete dominance, that one-to-one mapping breaks down, which is why phenotype alone cannot always tell you the underlying genotype. Question 39. Which of the following is a correct description of metaphase during mitosis? Your options are: A. Chromosomes condense and nuclear envelope disappears. B. Chromosomes gather at the cell poles. C. Chromosomes align along the cell center. D. Chromosomes start to separate from each other. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is C. Chromosomes align along the cell center. C is correct because during metaphase, the chromosomes line up along the equator, or center, of the dividing cell. The central alignment ensures that each new daughter cell will receive an identical set of chromosomes after separation in anaphase. A is wrong because chromosomes condensing and the nuclear envelope disappearing describes prophase, the first stage of mitosis. Metaphase comes after prophase and is defined by a different arrangement of the chromosomes within the dividing cell. B is wrong because chromosomes gathering at the cell poles describes telophase, when separated chromosomes reach the two poles of the dividing cell. By that point, metaphase has long since ended, so this does not describe metaphase at all. D is wrong because chromosomes starting to separate from each other describes anaphase, when sister chromatids are pulled apart by the spindle. Metaphase is defined by alignment, not by separation, so this does not match the metaphase stage. Mitosis moves through four visually distinct phases: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase, remembered with the acronym PAT. Each phase has a signature chromosomal arrangement that makes it identifiable under a microscope. In prophase, condensed chromosomes are scattered as the nuclear envelope breaks down. Metaphase is defined by chromosomes aligning precisely at the cell's equator. Anaphase shows sister chromatids pulling toward opposite poles, and telophase shows chromosomes decondensing as new nuclear envelopes form. At metaphase, every chromosome is positioned with its centromere exactly on the metaphase plate. Spindle microtubules from both poles attach to the kinetochores, creating a balanced, stable arrangement that ensures each sister chromatid can be pulled to the correct daughter cell. Chromosomes align because balanced spindle forces from each pole pull equally on the kinetochores. The spindle assembly checkpoint verifies that every chromosome has bipolar kinetochore attachment before allowing the cell to proceed. Failures produce aneuploid cells linked to cancer and developmental disorders. The critical exam signal for metaphase is chromosomes lined up at the equator with no separation yet. Signal words like metaphase plate, equatorial alignment, or chromosomes across the middle all point to metaphase, not anaphase, where chromatids are actively moving apart. Question 40. Which of the following pairs correctly matches a male reproductive structure with its function? Your options are A. Vas deferens, sperm production. B. Prostate gland, sperm storage. C. Seminiferous tubules, urine transport. D. Testes, sperm production. Got a guess? Lock it in! The correct answer is D. Tests sperm production. D is correct because the testes contain the seminiferous tubules where spermatogenesis takes place under hormonal control. They are the male gonads responsible for producing sperm and the steroid hormone testosterone in interstitial Leydig cells. A is wrong because the vas deferens transports sperm from the epididymis to the urethra during ejaculation. It is a conducting tube within the spermatic cord and does not produce sperm, which are formed within the testes themselves. B is wrong because the prostate gland secretes a milky alkaline fluid that nourishes and protects sperm and contributes to semen volume. It does not store sperm. Storage occurs primarily in the epididymis next to each testis. C is wrong because seminiferous tubules are the coiled structures within the testes where spermatogenesis occurs. They produce sperm rather than transport urine, which travels separately through the urethra during the act of urination. The testes are the central organs of male reproduction, and understanding their two core functions, sperm production and testosterone synthesis, is the key to answering anatomy questions correctly. Inside each testis, seminiferous tubules are tightly coiled structures where spermatogenesis unfolds. Spermatogonia line the tubule walls and divide to produce spermatocytes that undergo meiosis, eventually becoming haploid spermatids. Between the tubules, the interstitial cells of Leydig produce testosterone in response to luteinizing hormone. Spermatogenesis proceeds in stages. Meiosis reduces the chromosome number to produce haploid spermatids. Then spermiogenesis reshapes those spermatids, growing flagella and streamlining their form into fully mature spermatozoa. Each structure has a distinct role. The testes produce sperm and testosterone. The epididymis is where sperm mature and are stored. The vas deferens transports sperm during ejaculation. The seminal vesicles, prostate, and bulbourethral glands contribute the fluid components of semen. The classic exam error is assigning production to a transport or accessory structure. Keep the contrast clear. The testes are the source of both sperm and testosterone, and every other structure plays a supporting role. Question 41. Which type of cell results from cell division by meiosis? Your options are A. Sperm cell, B. Skin cell, C. Brain cell, D. Kidney cell. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is A. Sperm cell. A is correct because meiosis produces gametes, which are the sex cells used in sexual reproduction. In males, the gametes are sperm cells, and in females, they are egg cells, each with half the parent chromosome number for fertilization. B is wrong because skin cells are somatic cells produced by mitosis, not meiosis at all. Mitosis maintains the same chromosome number across generations of body cells, supporting growth, repair, and replacement of damaged tissue throughout the body. C is wrong because brain cells, like other body cells, are produced by mitosis during development of the embryo. Most mature neurons do not divide further, but they originate from mitotic divisions of neural stem cells. D is wrong because kidney cells are body cells produced by mitosis, which keeps the chromosome number constant. Meiosis is reserved for producing gametes in the reproductive organs, not for forming organs such as the kidneys in the body. Cell division in animals takes two distinct forms that serve completely different purposes. Mitosis renews and repairs somatic cells, while meiosis exists exclusively to produce gametes, the haploid sex cells needed for sexual reproduction. Meiosis achieves halving through two sequential divisions after a single round of DNA replication. Meiosis I separates homologous pairs, and meiosis II separates sister chromatids, yielding 4 haploid cells from one diploid starting cell. The arithmetic is straightforward. A diploid human carries 46 chromosomes. If gametes kept all 46, offspring would have 92, doubling every generation. Meiosis halves the count to 23, so fertilization restores exactly 46. In males, spermatogenesis unfolds inside the seminiferous tubules of the testes. A spermatogonium produces a primary spermatocyte that completes both meiotic divisions, yielding 4 haploid spermatids. Each spermatid then matures into a streamlined sperm cell. The central anchor is this: meiosis produces only gametes, sperm and eggs, in the gonads, while every other cell in the body originates from mitosis. Signal words like gamete, or ploid, or chromosome reduction point to meiosis, body cell, somatic, growth, or repair point to mitosis. Question 42. Which organ is the primary site of nutrient absorption in the digestive system? Your options are A. Stomach, B. Small intestine, C. Esophagus, D. Large intestine. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is B. Small intestine. B is correct because the small intestine, with its plicae, villi, and microvilli, has an enormous surface area for absorption. Most carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, and minerals are absorbed here into the blood and lymphatic vessels. A is wrong because the stomach mixes food with hydrochloric acid and pepsin and absorbs only small amounts of substances such as alcohol, water, and some medications. It is not the primary site of nutrient absorption in the body. C is wrong because the esophagus is a muscular tube that transports a swallowed bolus from the pharynx to the stomach by peristalsis. It does not absorb nutrients and serves only as a conduit for food and liquids. D is wrong because the large intestine absorbs water, electrolytes, and some vitamins produced by resident bacteria. The bulk of nutrient absorption from food occurs upstream in the small intestine before material reaches the colon. The small intestine is the body's primary site of nutrient absorption, and understanding why requires looking at its structure, its 3 subsections, and how different nutrients actually cross into the bloodstream. The small intestine achieves its absorptive power through 3 levels of folding: the plicae circulares, the villi, and the microvilli on each cell. Together, these structures expand the absorptive surface to roughly 250 square meters, larger than a tennis court. The small intestine has 3 subsections. The duodenum receives chyme and mixes it with bile and pancreatic enzymes, completing most chemical digestion. The jejunum is the primary site of carbohydrate, protein, and fat absorption. The ileum recovers vitamin B12, Bl salts, and any remaining nutrients before material exits through the ileocecal valve. Different nutrients use different pathways. Glucose and amino acids travel via carrier proteins coupled to sodium gradients. Fats are emulsified by bile, absorbed into intestinal cells, and repackaged as chylomicrons that enter the lymphatic system. Water-soluble vitamins use diffusion or carriers, while fat-soluble vitamins follow the same route as fats. The essential contrast is this: the small intestine handles nearly all nutrient absorption, while the large intestine recovers water and electrolytes and forms stool. Damage to the villi, as in celiac disease, produces malabsorption across the board, which is why intestinal structure and absorptive function are inseparable. Question 43. Select the best verb for the blank in the following sentence. The list of approved medications are posted near the medication room every Monday morning. Your options are A. Are, B. Were, C is D. Have been. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is C. is. C is correct because is correctly matches the singular subject list. The prepositional phrase of approved medications does not change the subject, which remains singular and present. The verb agrees with the head noun, not the phrase modifier here. A is wrong because R is plural and would only fit if the subject were medications. The true subject is list, which is singular, so it creates an agreement error. The prepositional phrase does not change the actual subject. B is wrong because were is plural past tense. The subject list is singular, and the routine described requires present tense. So where is wrong on both counts. The repeated weekly action calls for the simple present tense form. D is wrong because have been is plural present perfect. The singular subject list requires has been or more naturally for this routine. The simple present is. Repeated weekly actions are typically expressed in the simple present tense form. Subject-verb agreement requires the verb to match its subject in number, singular subject. Singular verb, plural subject, plural verb. The trick is identifying the true subject when other words get in the way. Prepositional phrases, beginning with words like of, in, or with, modify the head noun but never become the subject themselves. In the list of approved medications, the subject is list, not medications, so the verb must be singular. The most common trap is a singular noun followed by of and a plural noun. Phrases like a group of patients or a team of nurses all take singular verbs because the head noun is singular. Try mentally removing the phrase, the group is ready sounds right. The group are ready does not. Indefinite pronouns follow their own fixed rules. Each, every, and everyone are always singular. Each of the patients is given a wristband uses is because each is singular, regardless of the plural phrase that follows. Meanwhile, several, many, both, and few are always plural. Whenever you see a noun followed by of and a plural, find the head noun and ignore the prepositional phrase. The verb must agree with that head noun. That single habit will catch the majority of subject-verb agreement errors on entrance exams. Question 44. Which type of error appears in this sentence? Walking down the hall, the chart was reviewed by the nurse before her break began. Your options are A. Run-on sentence, B. Comma splice, C. Subject-verb mismatch, D. Dangling modifier. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is D. Dangling modifier. D is correct because dangling modifier is correct because the introductory phrase walking down the hall logically describes a person, but it grammatically attaches to chart, which cannot walk. The doer of walking is missing from the clause. A is wrong because run-on sentence joins two independent clauses without proper punctuation. This sentence has only one independent clause, so a run-on is not the issue. The introductory phrase is a modifier, not a separate clause. B is wrong because comma splice joins two independent clauses with only a comma. This sentence does not contain two independent clauses linked by a single comma, so the comma splice label does not apply to the error. C is wrong because subject-verb mismatch is when the verb disagrees with the subject. The verb was reviewed correctly agrees with its singular subject chart in this sentence, so subject-verb agreement is not the actual problem here. A dangling modifier is an introductory phrase whose implied actor doesn't match the grammatical subject of the sentence that follows. Understanding why this happens and how to fix it comes down to one core rule about how English grammar attaches phrases to subjects. English grammar automatically clips an introductory phrase onto whatever noun comes right after the comma. If the wrong noun is standing there, the phrase lands on it, logically or not. A chart can't walk, but grammatically it gets tagged as the walker anyway. The fix is always the same. Make the actual doer of the action the grammatical subject of the main clause. Once the nurse, the real walker, takes the subject position, The phrase attaches correctly and the sentence reads logically. 3 phrase types most often dangle: participial phrases ending in ing or said, infinitive phrases beginning with to plus a verb, and prepositional phrases with an implied actor. All 3 follow the same rule. Fartis, fart in da. They latch onto the subject that follows the comma, so that subject must be the one performing the implied action. There are 2 reliable ways to fix a dangling modifier. First, rewrite the main clause so the implied actor becomes the subject. Walking down the hall, the nurse reviewed the chart. Second, expand the introductory phrase into its own clause. As the nurse walked down the hall, the chart was reviewed. Either strategy closes the logical gap. Question 45. What is the basic functional unit of the kidney that filters blood and forms urine? Your options are A. Renal pyramid, B. Renal pelvis, C. Nephron, D. Glomerulus. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is C. Nephron. C is correct because the nephron is the basic functional unit of the kidney, with about 1 million in each kidney. Each nephron filters blood at the glomerulus, reabsorbs needed substances, secretes waste, and produces urine. A is wrong because a renal pyramid is a triangular region of the renal medulla containing collecting ducts and parts of nephrons. It is a structural region of the kidney rather than the basic functional unit itself. B is wrong because the renal pelvis is a funnel-shaped structure that collects urine from the calyces and channels it into the ureter. It transports urine but does not filter blood or form urine through tubular processing. D is wrong because the glomerulus is a tuft of capillaries within a nephron where filtration of blood plasma begins. It is part of a nephron rather than a complete functional unit that performs all steps of urine formation. The nephron is the kidney's smallest complete functional unit. Each kidney contains roughly 1 million nephrons working in parallel, and together they carry out every step of blood filtration and urine production. Every nephron independently runs the same 4-step sequence: filtration, reabsorption, secretion, and concentration. No other kidney structure completes all 4 steps on its own. But say to Wallis. That completeness is what defines the nephron as the fundamental unit. Blood enters through the afferent arteriole, and high pressure in the glomerulus forces fluid into Bowman's capsule. That filtrate travels through the proximal convoluted tubule, the loop of Henle, and the distal convoluted tubule, with each segment recovering or secreting specific substances into the surrounding peritubular capillaries. The distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct fine-tune urine composition under hormonal control. Aldosterone drives sodium reabsorption and potassium secretion. ADH increases water reabsorption to concentrate urine, and HL natriuretic peptide promotes sodium and water excretion to lower blood pressure. When a question asks for the kidney's basic functional unit, the answer is always the nephron. The glomerulus, renal pelvis, cortex, and medulla are all real structures, but none completes all 4 kidney processes alone. The nephron does. Question 46. Which of the following is not a function of the digestive tract? Your options are A. Gas exchange between air and blood, B. Enzymatic breakdown of food, C. Absorption of nutrients into blood, D. Elimination of unabsorbed waste. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is A. Gas exchange between air and blood. A is correct because gas exchange between air and blood is a function of the respiratory system occurring across the thin walls of the alveoli. It is not performed by the digestive tract or its accessory organs. B is wrong because enzymatic breakdown of food is a key function of the digestive tract. Enzymes from the salivary glands, stomach, pancreas, and small intestine digest carbohydrates, proteins, and fats into absorbable molecules in the lumen. C is wrong because absorption of nutrients into the blood is a major function of the digestive tract. Most digested carbohydrates, amino acids, vitamins, and minerals enter capillaries through the lining of the small intestine each day. D is wrong because elimination of unabsorbed waste is a function of the digestive tract. The large intestine compacts indigestible material and forms feces that are stored in the rectum and eliminated through the anus during defecation. The digestive and respiratory systems each have distinct, non-overlapping functions. Understanding where one system ends and another begins is foundational to physiology. The digestive tract has 4 core functions: ingestion, digestion, absorption, and elimination. Enzymes from the salivary glands, stomach, pancreas, and small intestine drive chemical breakdown, while the small intestine is the primary site of nutrient absorption. The respiratory system centers on ventilation, external respiration across alveolar membranes, internal respiration at tissue cells, and gas transport through the blood. None of these processes takes place in the digestive tract. The pharynx is the only anatomical region shared by both systems. The epiglottis closes over the larynx during swallowing to keep food out of the airway. After this brief crossing, food travels down the esophagus while air enters the trachea. The overlap is structural only, never functional. A reliable exam strategy: questions asking what the digestive tract does not do, almost always name a function from another system. Gas exchange belongs to respiratory, filtering blood to urinary, and pumping blood to cardiovascular. Intake, digestion, absorption, and elimination define the digestive boundary, nothing more. Question 47. What does the modern periodic table primarily organize elements by? Your options are A. Decreasing density, B. Alphabetical order of name, C. Order of discovery, D. Increasing atomic number. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is D. Increasing atomic number. D is correct because the modern periodic table arranges elements by increasing atomic number, which equals the proton count. This arrangement reveals the periodic recurrence of chemical and physical properties throughout the entire table for chemists worldwide. A is wrong because density does not increase regularly across the periodic table from one end to the other. Elements are not arranged by density at all, since density depends on atomic packing in ways that vary irregularly. B is wrong because alphabetical ordering would scatter related elements throughout the table without regard to chemical behavior. This arrangement would fail to reveal the recurring chemical patterns that the periodic arrangement is designed to display. C is wrong because order of discovery reflects history rather than chemical behavior of the elements involved. The periodic table is built around recurring properties, which are revealed only by an arrangement based on increasing atomic number. The periodic table arranges every known element by a single governing principle: atomic number, the count of protons in the nucleus. This ordering reveals repeating chemical patterns that make the table one of science's most powerful tools. Each horizontal row or period corresponds to filling a principal energy level. Each vertical column or group contains elements sharing the same valence electron configuration and therefore similar chemical behavior. Atomic number ordering exposes systematic trends. Atomic radius decreases across a period as rising nuclear charge pulls electrons inward and increases down a group as new electron shells are added. Ionization energy and electronegativity both increase left to right and decrease top to bottom. Every square in the table is assigned by proton count alone, as atomic number climbs by 1 with each step. Properties shift gradually across a period and then recur down each group. The defining pattern Moseley confirmed with X-ray spectroscopy. Remember, the periodic table is not sorted by atomic mass, density, or discovery order. Atomic number. What is it? The proton count is the single axis that aligns chemical recurrence and makes every trend in the table predictable. Question 48. Which of the following best describes the purpose of scientific notation? Your options are: A. Converts between temperature scales. B. Balances chemical equations. C. Expresses very large or small numbers. D. Identifies the charge of an ion. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is C. Expresses very large or small numbers. C is correct because scientific notation expresses very large or very small values compactly using a coefficient and a power of 10. This system simplifies calculations and reduces writing errors during careful scientific work and study. A is wrong because converting between temperature scales uses formulas relating Celsius, Fahrenheit, and Kelvin to one another. This task is unrelated to the compact notation system used to write extreme magnitudes simply in science. B is wrong because balancing equations applies the conservation of mass by adjusting coefficients carefully. This task is separate from the notation system used to write extreme numerical magnitudes in compact form during scientific work. D is wrong because ionic charge is determined by electron gain or loss based on group position on the periodic table. This determination has nothing to do with any system used to compact the writing of numerical magnitudes. Scientific notation is a compact system for writing numbers at extreme scales, from the size of subatomic particles to the distances between galaxies. It expresses any number as a coefficient between 1 and 10, multiplied by a power of 10. The structure has two parts. The coefficient always has exactly one non-zero digit before the decimal point. The exponent on the 10 captures the scale. A positive exponent means a large number, while a negative exponent means a small one. For example, 3.0 times 10 to the 8th represents 300 million. The decimal shifts 8 places, right? 3.0 times 10 to the negative 8th represents 30 billionths. The decimal shifts 8 places left. Calculations follow clean rules. To multiply the coefficients and add the exponents. To divide coefficients and subtract exponents. To add or subtract, first convert both numbers to the same exponent, then operate on the coefficients. Always normalize so the coefficient stays between 1 and 10. Without scientific notation, the mass of an electron would require 30 zeros after the decimal, and the mass of the sun would have 30 digits before it. Scientific notation keeps magnitude and precision readable. It is the working tool of every science dealing with extreme numbers. Question 48. Which type of error appears in the sentence? The patient was discharged this morning. His ride arrived shortly after lunch. Ended today. Your options are sentence fragment. B. Run-on sentence. C. Misplaced modifier. D. Faulty parallelism. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is B. Run-on sentence. B is correct because run-on sentence is correct because two independent clauses are joined with no punctuation or conjunction between morning and his. The clauses must be separated by a period, semicolon, or comma plus conjunction word. A is wrong because a fragment lacks a complete thought. This sentence contains two complete thoughts joined together. So the problem is too much, not too little, in one sentence. Fragments are the opposite kind of error from this. C is wrong because misplaced modifier describes a phrase placed too far from the word it modifies. The modifiers in the sentence are correctly positioned next to their nouns and verbs, so this error label does not apply. D is wrong because faulty parallelism occurs when items in a series do not share grammatical form. There is no series of items in this sentence to compare or evaluate, so parallelism is not the error in this sentence. A run-on sentence occurs when two independent clauses are jammed together with no punctuation to mark the boundary between them. Each clause has its own subject and verb and could stand alone, but the required separator is simply missing. The key distinction is what sits between the clauses. A run-on has nothing at all. A comma splice has a comma but no conjunction, too weak on its own. A correct compound sentence uses a semicolon or a comma paired with a coordinating conjunction. There are 4 standard repairs. You can add a period and capitalize the next word. Insert a semicolon. Place a comma plus a coordinating conjunction from fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet. So, or rewrite one clause using a subordinating conjunction like because or although. Think of these 3 errors as a triangle. A run-on has too much, 2 full clauses, no separator. A comma splice also has too much, 2 full clauses with only a weak comma. A fragment has too little. It never forms a complete subject-verb thought. When you encounter a long or complex sentence, strip away the modifiers and look for the bare subject-verb pairs. If 2 complete thoughts sit side by side with nothing between them, you have found your run-on. Question 50. Which of the following best describes a dominant allele? Your options are A. Expressed when only 1 copy is present. B. Requires 2 copies to be expressed. C. Always located on the X chromosome. D. Has no observable effect on organism. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is A. Expressed when only 1 copy is present. A is correct because a dominant allele is expressed in the phenotype whenever at least 1 copy is present in the cell. This means heterozygous individuals with 1 dominant and 1 recessive allele still show the dominant. B is wrong because an allele that requires 2 copies to be expressed describes a recessive allele, not a dominant one. Recessive alleles are masked when paired with a dominant allele in a heterozygous individual carrying both forms. C is wrong because alleles can be located on any chromosome, autosomal or sex chromosome. Being dominant has nothing to do with chromosome location, so dominance is not specific to the X chromosome in human or other genetic systems. D is wrong because an allele with no observable effect would not be classified as dominant by definition. Dominant alleles, by definition, produce a visible trait when present in either 1 or 2 copies in a given individual organism. Every gene locus holds 2 alleles, but they don't behave equally. The key principle in Mendelian genetics is that alleles differ in how many copies are needed before a trait appears in the phenotype. A dominant allele needs just 1 copy to produce the trait, while a recessive allele is masked whenever a dominant partner is present. Only when both alleles are recessive does the recessive phenotype finally emerge. Geneticists use uppercase letters for dominant alleles and lowercase for recessive. Both AA and AA individuals display the dominant phenotype because at least 1 dominant allele is present. Only AA individuals express the recessive trait. A cross between 2 heterozygous parents produces a 1:2:1 genotype ratio and a 3:1 phenotype ratio. 3/4 of offspring show the dominant trait because both AA and AA carry at least 1 dominant allele. Dominance is purely about copy number, not chromosome location or population frequency. Whenever you see phrases like single allele sufficient or masks the recessive, you are looking at a dominant allele. That brings today's HESI A2 review to a close. If you're hungry for more practice, our website has hundreds of free questions and full study guides waiting just for you. There's plenty here to help you sharpen your skills, so go ahead and follow the link in the description below, then dive right in and get started. Subscribe and stay tuned for the next part. Good luck on your exam.